Hi, my name is Shakiyla Smith, and I'm Vice President of Organizational Culture at the Fetzer Institute, but I am not speaking to you today in that capacity. I'm speaking to you as a longtime injury and violence prevention scholar practitioner and a longtime friend and partner of Safe States. One of the topics that's near and dear to my heart and what I spend a lot of time thinking, studying and planning around is how thinkers and doers of the 21st century, and that would be you, are actually able to meet and manage complexity through adaptive thinking and problem solving. And I think this is such an important topic for injury and violence prevention practitioners because many of the big injury and violence prevention challenges, from opioid overdose to community violence, are complex and really defy simple solutions. So this is what we're up to today. We're going to be talking about how to meet complexity through adaptive thinking and problem solving. So let me go ahead and get my PowerPoint slide up. But while I do that, you probably will need a pen and a paper or something to write on. And at a certain point, I'll even invite you into a little activity, but just let me get started for a moment here. Great, so this is what we're up to today. And just to go a little bit more into that, we only have a little time here, so I'll go through these concepts pretty quickly, but hopefully this talk will pick your interest a little bit and invite you to explore these concepts a little more deeply. In fact, there should be an article that I've included in this, this section here. So in our short time, my hope is to provide you an introduction to the concepts of technical and adaptive challenges, and then offer you some practical approaches for how to address them again. So are you ready? Let's start. So this here, I always like to start with this picture because I think it illustrates our current reality, period, but also in public health and injury and violence prevention, right? That we are dealing with challenges, unprecedented challenges in many ways that are characterized by rapid changes, complexity and ambiguity, right? We have these big multifactorial problems that defy easy solutions, limited resources, multiple, sometimes competing partners and stakeholders with diverse perspectives and priorities. Does this resonate with you at all, or am I the only one seeing this? And two concepts, well, let me back up a little bit. In addition to the typical knowledge and skills of a public health practitioner, I think, you know, this notion here, sorry, really illustrates the need for a systems perspective, or an ability to change and adapt, and an ability to learn and address problems collaboratively. And these are not typical capacities that we learn in our public health training, and yet here we are. So one of the ways that I have learned to work with or manage complexity, which really was a game changer for me, and two concepts that I'd like to introduce you to around these problems that we face, and professionally and personally, I would say too, are technical challenges and adaptive challenges. And really understanding them and their difference can have a huge impact on our change efforts. And Heifetz and Laurie, which they're the two folks, that's the article that I've referenced, but they're the two that really have informed our thinking around this, say that the single biggest failure of leadership is to treat adaptive challenges like technical problems, right? And so I'll say a little bit more about that. what do I mean by that exactly? Well, technical challenges are challenges that are easy to identify, often lend themselves to quick and easy solutions, and can often be solved by an authority or outside expert, right? And so here, the main takeaway is to note it. Basically, we know what the problem is, and even if it is a complicated problem or a complex problem, we have the competencies and the knowledge to manage that problem. And in fact, we can bring somebody else in to manage it. For a very simple example is if I have a problem with my car, I myself do not know anything about fixing cars, but there are other people who know how to fix cars, and I can take my car to those folks and they can figure out what's going on with the car and hopefully fix it, right? In the public health context, a good example of a technical challenge might be using helmet laws to reduce motorcycle deaths. And then we have adaptive challenges. And I want to say here that these exist on a continuum, right? Like there might be a challenge that is squarely technical or one that's squarely adaptive, but oftentimes challenges, or the really juicy ones, have components of both in them. Adaptive challenges, unlike technical ones, are difficult to identify, and they often require the creation of new knowledge, right? And also require a change in our values, beliefs, or relationships and approaches. And because of that, the people with the problem usually have to own the problem, including figuring out the solution to the problem. And again, most intractable problems are adaptive in nature. Another way to think about this that I really like is to think about technical challenges as requiring an action orientation, right? Because we know what the problem is, right? Like here we say the problem is clear, the solution is clear, we can solve it or we can outsource it to an expert or authority. It really, you just basically have to just do it, right? To use Nike's terms. Whereas adaptive challenges really require a learning orientation because we don't know often exactly what is going on with the problem. And so it really requires us to become curious to figure out what's going on. And then the work is with those who have the problem, which really has implications for how we do our work, because that implies that it's much more collaborative work, and also work that requires us to change and shift and grow in different ways, which is another reason why it's called adaptive. It requires us to adapt from our old ways of knowing and being and doing. So related to that, this here is what I like to call the doing, knowing, and being pyramid. And it really is, I like it this way because it really is like an iceberg, right? So typically our actions and our behaviors are most evident to us and certainly to other people, right? So they're above the line because we can take perspective on them easily and because they're visible and tangible. But beneath behavior is knowing, and our behavior is often informed by our ideas, thoughts, and feelings, right? And then deeper still is the space of our being, which influences our thoughts and our feelings, right? Like that includes our mental models and our worldviews and our underlying assumptions that we have, which are often very difficult to take perspective on without, paying particular attention or awareness to these things. And the reason why I bring this up is because, again, technical solutions often fall in the domain of doing and knowing, right? Like that action orientation that I talked about in the previous slide, whereas adaptive solutions, which often require us to change to change in some way, right? And to be in a learning orientation require often shifts in our worldview and our beliefs and values, which can be a lot more gnarly. So I mentioned, hopefully that's clear, that again, I told you I was going to go through that pretty quickly, but what I would like you to do, I'm going to ask you here to pause your video in a moment, right? And get your pen and paper out to do this quick exercise, just to get the point, to bring this idea home here. And what I would like you to do specifically is draw on your piece of paper a T, kind of like to recreate what I have up on the screen here. And then just take a minute first to list out the current challenges that you are dealing with or that take up your time in your work context, right? And you can think about it as a manager if you're a manager, or you can think about it in terms of working with other organizations around prevention, any of those things, right? And maybe make a list of up to 5, right? You don't have to go crazy. Let's just do 5 of them. And then what I would like for you to do after you come up with that list is to then place the challenges in either the technical or adaptive column here. And if some of them, again, I remember I said that they were a continuum, some have elements of both. If that's the case, then you can put them down the middle line in between adaptive and technical challenges. So just those are the instructions. Pause your video for a moment and then just take time to do that. Okay, so welcome back. If you did I'm assuming you did do the exercise and you did not cheat, but that's okay if you did. But for those of you who did do the activity, how was that for you? Was that illuminating? So I've asked a lot of leaders and practitioners from public health to higher education to do this similar activity. And here's a picture of what they've come up with. And these are 2 separate groups. They're 2 examples, but this is very typically what I see, right? And you can notice here that there are lots of adaptive challenges. There are, several that fall into both categories again, but you get the point. The point is that most of the challenges that people deal with in their professional lives have an adaptive quality. And the reason why that's important, again, is because the first step to managing an adaptive challenge is first to recognize when you are having an adaptive challenge. Otherwise, we attempt to solve them, using technical solutions or quick fixes that are not going to actually work for that. So what do you do about that, right? Like now that you've realized that you have a bunch of adaptive challenges on your hand, what to do? Well, I'll go through, there's a lot to do, in fact, aside from taking the learning orientation that I talked about. But I just want to go through very quickly some suggestions that Heifetz and Lori offer in their article about how to address adaptive challenges. Again, because we only have a short amount of time here together. The first thing that that we can do, and they say is really important, is getting on the balcony, right? And what this involves is it's connected to what I said earlier about the first step is to recognize that you're having an adaptive challenge, which is challenging. And here you're invited to step out of the fray or the field of action and see the bigger picture, right? Like to view the patterns and take a larger perspective on different dynamics that are happening, right? If you picture a balcony. And really, I would say any skillful practitioner really needs the capacity to move back and forth between the field of action or the dance floor and the balcony, right? Like you have to be doing both at any given point, right? So, and that's where you can kind of see larger things happening. And then the second piece is to identify the adaptive challenge, right? This is difficult to do. It's not easy. It seems easy, but it's not. And the question that I usually will ask myself is this a technical challenge that just requires a change in behavior, practice, or strategy, right? Or does it require simple expert advice or technical adjustments, if you will, to fix it? Or is this a challenge that requires different ways of doing our work, new competencies, new relationships, and collaborations? And if it does, then you know that that's your first clue that you are in the adaptive space, right? Another way to put it is, does this require me and others to change in any way, right? Remember that doing, knowing, and being pyramid, right? One of the hints here is that when implementation is a problem, it's usually an adaptive challenge, right? Like that's the kind of like another hint. The third thing that they talk about is regulating distress, right? And this is something, especially if you are in a formal leadership role, but even if you aren't, if you're managing any process or, you know, we all have personal leadership that we can exercise, but basically to manage distress or regulate distress first in yourself and others, because anything that requires change, as we know, especially change in our values and ways of working, can create some stickiness for us often, right? And so here you want to manage, regulating distress also involves managing the balance between ease and effort, right? And you want to stay in that space of efforting or discomfort that really necessitates change and makes us energized, right? But not be overwhelmed by it. And the other part of that is really addressing conflicts and having tough discussions, but also pacing the work and paying attention to these things. And the other part of regulating distress, which is so important, especially when engaging in any change efforts, is to really cultivate your own and the group's emotional capacity to tolerate uncertainty, frustration, and discomfort, which comes when we're dealing with intractable problems or challenges, adaptive challenges. The fourth piece is to maintain disciplined attention, right? And this is really just talking about staying the course and doing the work, right? That's really hard. It is, because some of these things are, they're hard. And this, there's a lot of needed skills and capacities to be able to do this that are embedded in this. One, collaborating and seeking multiple perspectives, especially when it's easier not to, or when it's uncomfortable, right? Naming and managing conflict is another thing. Managing ambivalence. A lot of times I find that change is one of those things that can often induce ambivalence, right? Like we want change on the one hand, we like change and progress, but then we also want to avoid discomfort. And I don't know about you and what your experience has been, but in my experience in what I can see of other people's experience is that most change and progress involves some discomfort, right? And then the final part about staying the course and doing the work of maintaining disciplined attention is not being avoidant. And then the next piece is leaving the problem and the solution with everyone, right? So here, that's hard for some of us. And I think especially for public health practitioners who are problem solvers, that's what we get rewarded for. You know, and we're good folks. We want to change the world and alleviate suffering, right? But again, what did we talk about? How adaptive challenges require a learning rather than an action orientation initially. So part of leaving the problem and the solution with everyone is not rushing in to save the day or to generate solutions on our own, right? Again, these are not problems that that can be outsourced to other people, but they have to be managed collaboratively and collectively. So here, we really have to leave the responsibility with the people who own the problem, right? And then finally, I will say about this one that Heifetz talks about is defining the problem and the solution must rest with the problem holders or the people who are most impacted by that problem. Again, this is so hard for experts often, but it's good to remember that no one person or organization has the answer, especially in a complex multifactorial problem. And the collective IQ is always going to be bigger than the individual IQ. And then finally, they talk about protecting voices from below. And this is particularly for people who are in leadership roles. And I would also say, even if you aren't like marginalized viewpoints, right? And here, this is about how you allow all voices, again, particularly those that are marginalized or considered deviant or outliers, right? And I'm putting those in quotes, air quotes there. Voices that can disrupt the usual patterns and reveal incongruencies, right? Like we want those voices in this case, because we need to be able to see the full scope of the problem because it is complex and requires all of our thinking, right? So here, a good question to ask is, is there something that I'm missing or that we're missing? And usually if that voice or perspective makes you uncomfortable, lean into that because there's some wisdom in that for you. So those are, that was a lot. Again, Heifetz and Lori outline these more in detail in their article. So check out the article, but I just wanted to, quickly go through those. And just some final thoughts and reflections before I end to highlight some of the key points that I brought up here. It's really important that we as public health practitioners and professionals and leaders cultivate the ability to move from the field of action to the balcony. So going back and forth, right? When we do our work. And in many ways, just to draw a connection here, the balcony, getting on the balcony can really be seen as taking a systems perspective, right? Part of systems thinking. And it'll help us do the important work of identifying the difference between technical and adaptive challenges, right? And that's vitally important, as I said earlier, to finding and applying the right solutions is noticing the difference between the two, right? Because you cannot solve adaptive problems with technical solutions. Adaptive challenges require new learning and collaborative problem solving, right? not just outsourcing the problem to experts who have simple solutions to those. And then finally, the good news is that this is a practice and a skill set that we can all develop, right? And it's vitally important that we do this. And the final thing I'll just say related to that is technical expertise is necessary. I don't want to give off the impression that that's not necessary, but it is not sufficient. So that's all that I have to offer you at this time. Again, hopefully this piqued your interest about technical challenges and adaptive challenges for managing complexity that we all face. And thank you very much. Take care.